Here are some 3D printed parts from a recent project where I wanted to install a small shelf in the corner of our living room right above the sofa. So this is a shelf bracket, and the black version here is the first version. I quickly modeled this in CAD, printed it, installed the shelf, but I could immediately tell that this was way too flexible. Just by pushing here with not much force, I can bend it. And when I installed it on the wall, I could feel when I touched the shelf, I could feel that it was flexible. So this is no good. The shelf isn't intended to hold any great amount of weight, just small knickknacks. But still, this was way too flexible for my liking. So I updated the design to this version, and these are all printed in PETG. It's just different colors. The wallpaper is white, so I wanted to use white filament to match the wallpaper and blend in a bit. This version here, the most important structural improvement is that I filleted the corners here. So all the corners are rounded out, and that it adds some material and improves the stiffness of the corners, and that does a lot to improve the overall stiffness of the bracket. I also added a cutout right there, and this is to improve the installment. When I install the bracket on the wall, I need to screw it to the wall, so my screwdriver needs to get in there, and then this strut or brace is in the way, and the thicker it is, the steeper the angle the screwdriver has to have, and that reduces the grip you get on the screw head. So the first version here, the thickness of this is exactly the same as all the other pieces, and that means it's more difficult to get in there with the screwdriver. So even though I added this cutout, so this part is thinner, which in theory would make it less stiff, more easily bent. Even though I did that, the part overall feels more rigid, thanks to the filleted corners. So that was an improvement. These two first versions were printed with 20% infill. I made a minor update to this where I went up to 50% infill. It slightly improved it improved the stiffness a bit. There's a noticeable difference in the stiffness. Another important improvement between these two versions, the later versions and the initial one, is the distance of the screw holes from the screw hole to the corner. So this distance here is the longer it is, the easier it is to bend the shelf off the wall, because this material here wants to bend. When you apply force on the shelf in that direction, this thing wants to bend out from the wall, and the greater the distance from the screw hole, the more of a moment arm it has to bend. It's got more leverage to bend out from the wall. So in all the following versions, I reduced the distance a bit, and I think that improved the stability of the shelf. So this third version, as I said, I increased the infill from 20% to 50%. I also did some minor updates, added chamfers on the ends, and rounded out this corner, which was pointy before. Still, I wasn't perfectly happy with the result, so this is my final version where I added 2 more struts here. So now this is much more rigid, even though this is printed with 40% infill. So I went down a little bit with the infill, but this change makes this very stiff, very rigid. It feels completely secure when it's installed on the wall. I can't bend the shelf at all, although I haven't tested it to its limit. I don't want to break it unnecessarily. So I could have filled all this area in, made it solid, and that's quite practical with 3D printing. That using the infill, you typically have a low percentage of infill, like 20%, and 20% is usually enough to make the parts very rigid. So with 3D printing, if I would have made this completely solid, it wouldn't drastically increase the material use, and so that wouldn't be a problem. But I just kind of like having a lot of space here. I think it makes the shelf bracket more invisible, and this is what it looks like installed on the wall. And I think the holes are nice, that they reduce the amount of shadows that the brackets cast, and since it's all a white piece, it blends in nicely with the wall. So I'm happy with this result, and it was a fun design challenge. It was interesting to iterate and see how can I make this more rigid while still having a low profile.